It's China's biggest shopping festival. Billboards flash, discounts scream, but the stores? Empty. Inside a top-tier electronics mall in Shenzhen, salesmen scroll their phones. No one walks in. A banner that once promised, "The future is here," now hangs crooked, untouched. This is not poverty. It's not panic. It's something colder, a quiet refusal. A silent message from 1.4 billion people. We're done spending. What killed China's consumer dream? What turned the middle class from proud shoppers into cautious survivors? Maybe the scariest crisis isn't when people riot in the streets. Maybe it's when they stay home and stop believing. There's a dangerous kind of collapse. Not one marked by violence or chaos, but by silence. Across Chinese cities, demand is vanishing. Not because people are broke, but because they've stopped believing. Official data shows it clearly. Retail sales in March fell by 10% in Beijing and 14.1% in Shanghai. These aren't outlier numbers, they're symptoms of something systemic. People are pulling back from the market in droves. But here's the twist. This isn't just economic. It's psychological. The middle class, the pride of China's rise, is freezing. According to the IMF, household savings have surged to 32%, the highest level in over a decade. Families are hoarding cash, avoiding major purchases, canceling travel plans. Even big-ticket items like appliances or phones are being deferred indefinitely. And this isn't about inflation or price shocks. It's about fear. Fear of layoffs. Fear of stagnation. Fear that tomorrow won't be better than today. A marketing executive in Guangzhou put it simply, it's not that people don't have money. It's that they no longer know what they're saving for. That shift in mindset is lethal to any consumption-driven model. Because when a population decides to stop dreaming, no brand, discount, or stimulus can reverse that overnight. You can feel it in the streets. Luxury malls half full. Shopping apps reporting plummeting traffic. Even Alibaba quietly revised its sales forecasts downward, citing structural softness in urban demand. In a system where confidence is currency, China's is evaporating. It's visible in everyday life. Restaurants have cut staff. Delivery riders report shorter routes. Sales associates now spend more time updating spreadsheets than closing sales. And this freeze isn't limited to one city or region. It's everywhere. From Tier 1 cities like Shenzhen and Beijing to smaller industrial towns, the pattern repeats. People are earning, but not spending. That's a nightmare for any economy. But for China, it's existential. Because China's post-COVID recovery was never going to be export-driven alone. It depended on domestic demand, the so-called dual circulation model. But what happens when the second half of that model collapses? What happens when people stop showing up for the miracle? One local economist, speaking off the record, called it the invisible lockdown. And that's exactly what it is. A lockdown of optimism. A paralysis not imposed by the state, but chosen by the people. The scariest part? No one knows how long it'll last. Because once people stop spending, not out of necessity but out of fear, it takes more than cash to unfreeze them. It takes trust. And trust is the one thing China's economy can't manufacture on command. This didn't start with empty malls. It started when the orders stopped coming. For years, China's consumer class was propped up by something larger than national pride. It was driven by an economic engine that churned through exports, manufacturing, and rising wages. That engine has stalled. Trump's tariffs weren't just a headline. They were a rupture. In 2024, tariffs targeting key Chinese sectors, steel, solar, electric vehicles, spiked to as high as 145%. And for broader consumer goods, rates jumped to between 10% and 25%. Slashing margins and demand overnight. It wasn't just about price. It was about predictability. The trade relationship between the world's two largest economies collapsed into chaos. Suddenly, factories couldn't plan ahead. Orders dried up. Logistics chains froze. And that uncertainty infected everything downstream, including workers, salaries, and domestic consumption. One factory manager in Zhejiang explained it bluntly. We used to have 6-month forecasts. Now we're surviving week to week. Exporters tried to pivot. Some looked to Southeast Asia. Others hoped Europe might pick up the slack. But the reality was brutal. No market could replace American demand overnight. Meanwhile, Beijing's much-hyped dual circulation strategy, meant to boost internal consumption, hit a wall, because you can't force people to spend when they're afraid. The cycle became self-reinforcing. Exports drop, factories cut hours, wages shrink, consumers save, demand collapses, factories close. Repeat. And this chain reaction didn't happen in a vacuum. It was designed. Trump's trade war wasn't just about punishing China. It was about exposing its dependency. The idea was simple. If you cut off demand from the outside, would the inside hold? So far, the answer is no. And the psychological damage runs deep. For every factory that closed, there's a neighborhood that stopped spending. For every worker laid off, a dozen families hit pause on their plans. This isn't recession. It's rejection. The system isn't crashing. It's being abandoned. And here's the part no one's ready to say out loud. The American strategy is working. Not because of military might, but because of leverage. By locking down key trade channels, restricting reroutes through Vietnam and Mexico, and tightening certificate of origin requirements, the U.S. didn't just hurt exports. It destroyed confidence. Behind closed doors, Beijing knows it. Insiders have admitted that emergency stimulus won't be enough. Local officials are being told to stabilize expectations, not numbers. And central planners now quietly speak of managing decline. This is what happens when the world's second-largest economy hits a wall and has nowhere left to pivot. And when the consumers, already shaken, see no future path. They stay home, not because they're told to, but because nothing outside is worth believing in. The death of demand doesn't just haunt shopping malls. It spreads to boardrooms, warehouses, and production lines. Across China's private sector, the quiet contraction is turning into a full-blown retreat. Start with the factories. In 2024 alone, nearly 15% of small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, declared bankruptcy officially. The real number is likely far higher, hidden behind non-renewed leases, vanishing websites, and shuttered gates. In Dongguan, once the epicenter of light manufacturing, entire industrial parks now sit in silence. No trucks, no forklifts, just weeds growing through concrete. One former shoe factory owner, now driving rideshare in Shenzhen, said, "I had 120 workers. Then the orders stopped. 3 months later, the machines were gone. I didn't even sell them. I abandoned them." This is the chain reaction of collapse. No orders, no production, no payroll, no consumption. Repeat. And the pain isn't just for producers. It's for all the businesses that orbit them. Packaging companies, logistics hubs, equipment rental firms, office suppliers, cafeterias that once served thousands of lunchboxes daily. When production dies, so does the local economy around it. In the past, China could rely on domestic investment to cushion the blow. Local governments would pour funds into infrastructure, spark job creation, and keep the wheels turning. But not this time. Debt levels are too high. Land sales, once a major source of local revenue, have plunged. And Beijing's central planners have made it clear. No more bailouts for inefficiency. That leaves the private sector gasping for air. In Hangzhou, a former textile cluster, 7 of 10 factories have downsized or shut down entirely. One factory owner left a sign on his gate, "Gone to look for demand." The cruel irony? Demand isn't just missing. It's not even being looked for anymore, because businesses have lost hope. Alibaba's latest earnings call hinted at prolonged softness in core markets. JD.com cut over 5,000 jobs in Q1. Even TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, paused domestic expansion projects citing volatility in user sentiment. This isn't a tech bust. It's a system-wide chill. And while headlines might highlight EV success stories or chip investment pushes, those are islands in a frozen sea. The broader economy, the everyday economy, is freezing over. The nightmare scenario isn't factories on fire. It's factories perfectly intact, but lifeless. Idle equipment, empty break rooms, HR departments still sending out pay stubs with zero bonuses attached. What's happening isn't dramatic enough for global headlines, but it's death by 1,000 quiet exits. And the scariest part? No one is stepping in. Local governments are underfunded. The central government is cautious. And consumers, once the fallback engine, are in lockdown mode. So businesses are left alone, watching demand disappear like mist. A business leader in Suzhou summed it up best. We're not afraid of competition. We're afraid of being forgotten. And that's exactly what's happening. In a world that once depended on China to power growth, the world is now adapting without it. And inside China, businesses are learning a painful truth. You can survive a crisis, but surviving irrelevance? That's a different battle entirely. When the machines stop, people notice. But when people stop, no one sees it coming. Across China, a quiet social retreat is unfolding. One that's far more dangerous than any economic metric. Because while the headlines focus on GDP and factory output, the real collapse is happening in the minds and hearts of the people. The middle class is opting out. Not in protest, not in anger, but in exhaustion. Young workers in Tier 1 cities are quitting their jobs and moving back home. College graduates are ghosting the labor market entirely. And millions of white-collar professionals are turning to what they call low-desire living, a minimalist existence designed to survive, not thrive. This isn't about laziness. It's about self-preservation. The promises of upward mobility, stable careers, and urban prosperity have broken down. For many, the cost of participating in the system, both financially and psychologically, simply isn't worth it anymore. And so, the withdrawal begins. Online forums once filled with career advice and startup tips are now dominated by exit plans, visa guides, and emotional burnout confessionals. One post titled, "I haven't left my apartment in 3 days," received over 800,000 views. Mental health clinics in Beijing and Shanghai report waitlists stretching months. Therapists are warning of an epidemic of chronic hopelessness. And yet, the government response is silence, or worse, denial. Official youth unemployment data was pulled from public reporting in late 2023. Instead, state media focuses on inspiring stories of graduates becoming farmers or live stream sellers. But everyone knows the truth. People aren't chasing dreams anymore. They're managing disappointment. One 27-year-old architecture grad in Chengdu now works part-time at a coffee stand. He says it's not about money. "I just can't play the game anymore," he shrugs. "I don't believe in it." The scariest part of this trend is how rational it is. Why fight for a raise when your boss might close the office next quarter? Why buy an apartment when prices keep falling and marriage rates are in freefall? Why have kids when childcare costs are rising and the future looks darker every year? It's not rebellion. It's strategic disengagement. This quiet exit is spreading fast. Among students, among workers, among entire families. Even those with means are leaving. Emigration applications in Canada, Singapore, and the US have surged. In 2024, more than 300,000 high-net-worth individuals left China, the highest number on record. For those who stay, the new motto is simple: keep your head down, save everything, expect nothing. And that's the real danger. A population that doesn't expect anything won't demand reform. But it won't rebuild either. It just drifts, quietly, permanently. And when 1.4 billion people begin to emotionally detach from the future, you don't just lose consumer demand. You lose momentum, purpose, the belief that tomorrow is worth investing in. That's not just an economic risk. It's the slow death of national ambition. As China's citizens pull back from the future, the world is pulling back from China. This isn't a trade war. It's a quiet divorce. Foreign companies, once desperate to break into China's booming consumer market, are quietly packing their bags. In 2024, more than 70% of American and European firms operating in China reported reduced confidence in the market, citing unclear policies, shrinking demand, and rising political risk. And it's not just surveys. Big players are voting with their feet. Adidas closed several flagship stores. Apple ramped up production in India. Starbucks suspended expansion plans. Even luxury brands, once shielded by elite demand, are reporting slower growth and mood hesitancy among Chinese buyers. The shift is psychological. China is no longer seen as the land of limitless consumption. It's seen as a risk. A French retail executive said privately, "China used to be our future. Now it's our uncertainty." Capital is following the same path. In the first half of 2025, foreign direct investment into China fell to its lowest level in 18 years. Venture capital funding dried up. International banks scaled back lending. Even foreign talent is leaving. Expat communities in Shanghai and Beijing are shrinking for the first time in over a decade. This isn't just about business. It's about narrative. The story China sold to the world, the rise of the unstoppable middle class, the gateway to billions of customers, the modern consumer superpower, is unraveling. And global firms are rewriting their playbooks. China plus one is now just anywhere but China. Supply chains are relocating to Vietnam, Mexico, and India. Investors are pouring into Southeast Asia. Corporate strategies are built around risk hedging, not market capture. Even the so-called China bulls on Wall Street are going quiet. What they all realize is this: you can't sell into a market that has lost its appetite. The consequences go beyond revenue. Global brands once used Chinese demand to justify expansion, innovation, and hiring. Now they're bracing for contraction. And the geopolitical undertone is sharpening. Western governments, spooked by economic coercion and growing authoritarianism, are discouraging long-term exposure to China. Washington's messaging is clear: decouple where you must, de-risk where you can. Meanwhile, Beijing responds with slogans. Consumption will return. The fundamentals are strong. But the world has heard these lines before. And this time, it's not buying. China is still a huge economy. But in the eyes of many global players, it has gone from a must-have to a maybe later. From an anchor of growth to a liability on the books. And the hardest truth for Beijing? The world is learning to live without China. Not out of hostility, but out of necessity. Because when a country's people stop spending, stop dreaming, and stop participating, outsiders stop investing. You don't build a global strategy around silence. And that's what China is becoming. A quiet giant, stepping back while the rest of the world moves forward. This wasn't a crash. It was a slow exhale, the sound of a billion people stepping back from ambition. No riots, no chaos, just empty stores, paused dreams, quiet exits. China's miracle wasn't built on concrete or steel. It was built on belief, on the shared idea that tomorrow would be better. Now that belief is unraveling. The question isn't how low growth will fall. It's how long a country can drift without a dream. And for the rest of the world, the bigger question is this: if China stops believing in its future, what happens to everyone who built theirs around it?